Emma Carter, a former investigative journalist from New York, arrived at Haven Ridge Lodge with a suitcase full of old files about her World War II veteran father. She carried a heart fractured by divorce, a silver necklace that once belonged to the daughter who left 8 months ago, and a question no one dared to answer. Why has the U.S. government quietly avoided this abandoned lodge for over 70 years? Locals warned her, "Don't open that door, they'll come back." But on her first night, beneath the lodge's floorboards, Emma heard knocking and a voice whisper her daughter's name. The dirt road leading to Haven Ridge Lodge looked more like a fracture through the forest than a path. Grass had overgrown the edges, and tire tracks glistened with mud under the late afternoon sun. Emma Carter quietly turned off the ignition. She sat still for a few seconds, staring through the windshield. The structure ahead rose like a wartime relic. Rotting wood, a sagging roof, windows shattered like blind, broken eyes. She exhaled, opened the door, grabbed her suitcase. Inside were a few changes of clothes, a voice recorder, a bundle of files tied with rope, and a small silver necklace that had once belonged to her daughter. Emma had stopped at the town's only general store 2 days earlier to buy basic supplies. The shopkeeper, an older woman with a wiry frame and silver hair pulled tightly back, glanced at the rope and flashlight on the counter, then stared at Emma without blinking. "What are you planning to do in there?" "I just bought the lodge." The woman smirked. "There was someone like you once, back in 2006, Iraq vet, said he was looking for old WWII records, started digging around that place, then disappeared." Emma said nothing. As the woman bent to grab a receipt, she added quietly, "His car sat out in the woods for a week, then it vanished too." When Emma was a child, her father used to tell stories about Normandy, not the heroic kind, but about the soldiers who didn't have names on casualty lists, about files that were lost, torn up, or ordered to be burned. He never told the whole story. He just repeated one line, "The truth needs soil to grow in." Emma lost her father when she was 23. She lost her job in New York at 41, after refusing to retract an exposé about mishandled military death records. The lodge was a gamble, but it also felt like a calling, maybe her last. She stepped into the main hall. The floorboards groaned. The air was thick with old smoke and mildew. While clearing out the remains of the fireplace, something caught the light, a warped silver dish, its surface tarnished and barely legible. U.S. Army surplus, 1947. Ash dust clung to its rim. The back was scorched, as if it had once been set aflame. Emma picked it up. Her hand went cold. A breeze slipped through a crack in the door, brushing her hair, carrying with it a strange sensation, like her father's breath. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she did believe in legacy. And the lodge was clearly keeping something it didn't want to be found. Mornings at the lodge had a strange kind of stillness, not the quiet of nature, but the dead pause of a room interrupted mid-story. Emma tied her hair up, threw on jeans, pulled on gloves, and started with the last room at the end of the hallway, once a library, according to the building plans. Bookshelves had collapsed inward, pages strewn like ashes after a fire. One shelf had burned so entirely in the far corner that only its blackened frame remained. While sifting through the ruined stacks, her hand brushed against something heavy, smooth, and cold. She pulled it free, a black leather-bound Bible, scorched at the corner, but miraculously intact. She flipped open the first page. In faded blue ink, a handwritten message. To Emma, Normandy, 1944. Faith survives the fire. Dad. She sank to the floor. Flashbacks crashed over her like waves. Childhood nights spent listening to her father's steady voice in dim lamplight. He spoke not of bullets or medals, but of files burned in government furnaces, of soldiers who vanished not from the battlefield, but from history. He once whispered, almost afraid of his own words, "Some men are never buried, because they never existed on paper." She clutched the Bible. In that moment, the lodge wasn't just a ruined shell. It was a place her father had either feared or foreseen. That night, Emma lit a small gas heater in the old office and began scribbling notes in a leather-bound journal. As her flashlight scanned the wall under the desk, she heard something, barely audible but distinct. A tapping. Tap, 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 tap. She frowned, counted the rhythm. Tap, S, tap, 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 O, tap, S, Morse, SOS. She held her breath. Who or what was sending out a distress signal from beneath a rotting floor? Not ghosts, not delusion. Morse is a language, and languages come from the conscious. She stepped closer and tapped back with her flashlight. SOS, silence. Then, a reply. Weak, brief, but real. Emma backed away, heart pounding. She sat down, opened her journal, and wrote, "Not supernatural, possibly memory, possibly human, possibly a cry for help, from buried American history." She shut the journal, but her mind echoed a single word. Signal. The morning sky was heavy, like it had been blanketed with a thick gray sheet. Emma brewed coffee on her camping stove, then grabbed her notebook and flashlight, heading back to the kitchen where she'd heard the Morse code the night before. At the far corner of the kitchen, the floorboards rose slightly, as if they'd once been pried up and hastily nailed back down. She knelt and used a crowbar to lift the warped wood. Beneath the black dust and crumbling brick, she found a rusted iron ring bolted into a thick wooden hatch. She gave it a pull. The door creaked up inch by inch, the hinges groaning, like old metal waking from decades of silence. A cold draft rose, carrying the scent of damp soil, rust, and something that smelled like old ash. She didn't descend right away. Instead, she drove back into town. She needed rope, a safety harness, and, if she was lucky, a bit of truth from the only woman in Haven Ridge who didn't seem afraid of it. Helen was wrapping a parcel when she saw her. Her eyes skimmed the rope, paused, then narrowed. "You're going down there, aren't you?" she asked, without needing to say where there was. "I need to know," Emma replied calmly. Helen gave a slight nod, then lowered her voice. "In 2006, a guy came here, said his grandfather mentioned a hidden room under the lodge, that it held burned military files from after Normandy." "He disappeared?" Emma asked. "The cops found his car," Helen said. "Lights still on. The hatch was open." She stepped back behind the counter and slid forward a folded piece of paper. Aged, no logo, no source. Emma opened it, typed in faded ink. "CIA precursors, burn orders, Haven Ridge, Arkansas, target U.S. Army surplus records, 1948. Her heart slammed, her hands turned cold. That afternoon, she tied the rope around her waist, anchored the other end to a rusted gas pipe, clicked on her flashlight, slipped on gloves, and grabbed the iron ring. 1 step, 2. The damp stone stair groaned beneath her boot. Crack. A rock splintered. She slipped, flashlight jerking wildly, her heart hammered. She caught the wooden railing. A chunk broke loose, scraping her palm raw. But she held. Her light shone downward. More stone steps, coiling into the earth like a spinal cord made of ruin. She exhaled. Then, so faint she thought it imagined, a whisper from the deep. "Lily." A voice, soft as wind, but it froze her where she stood. No one here knew her daughter's name. No one. She aimed her flashlight into the dark. Nothing but shadow. But to Emma, the lodge wasn't just an abandoned relic anymore. It was alive. It was waiting. And maybe it remembered. Her flashlight swept across cold stone surfaces, shadows stretching like the backbone of time. Emma descended each step as if entering a memory sealed shut. At the bottom, she found a circular chamber, walls made of old stone, buttressed by thick wooden beams. The air smelled of wet earth, rusted metal, and something else, like cremated bone. This wasn't a wine cellar. It wasn't for storage. It was a graveyard of memory. She turned her light to the left. Wooden military crates lined the wall. Some were marked with faded stencils. U.S. Army Surplus, 1944. Cobra Operation, Field Reports, Confidential. Her hand trembled as she pried one open. Inside, a map of Normandy with red circles around evacuation zones and a thick stack of typed documents. Casualties, 523. Officially reported, 28. Others, unlisted. Orders to suppress, pending. Emma clenched her flashlight tighter. This was it. Everything her father had whispered about. The deaths no one claimed. The reports never read on the evening news. Another crate held personal items. Badges, black and white photographs of soldiers, a folded pocket knife, and a small leather notebook. Faded initials on the cover. RTM. She opened it. The handwriting was slanted, sharp, but full of restraint. My name is Robert T. Miller. I cannot rest knowing my friend has been erased from history. If I die, don't let them die with me. Emma turned the following page and froze. A photo slipped out. 3 young soldiers standing by a broken stone wall. One of them was her father, in uniform, next to a man labeled Robert T. Miller. She whispered, "Grandpa?" Only the earth murmured in reply. But the puzzle clicked. A grandfather never spoken of. Not because he vanished, but because he was erased. She closed the journal, resting her hand on the Normandy map. Her flashlight made the faded type glow. Suppressed by order. Then, thud. A sharp bang from above. The hatch? Someone had closed it? Emma looked up, flashlight sweeping the stone ceiling. Nothing clear. But the room suddenly felt heavier. Not just with the weight of the past, but with the presence of the present. Someone might be watching. She tightened her grip and whispered the line her father used to say, "The truth needs soil to grow in." And now, she'd found the soil. Amid dust, fire, and cold stone, Emma Carter made a vow. She would bring this truth into the light, even if it meant taking on the entire town. After a nearly sleepless night, Emma returned to the cellar with an empty backpack, fresh gloves, and a fully charged flashlight. She knew now she wasn't alone, not in the supernatural sense, but in the real human one. She scanned the wall where she'd found the journal the day before. A small crack was in the corner behind the military crates, covered in old plaster and mold. Using her knife, she carefully chipped away the rotting stone. A shallow cavity appeared inside it, a folded piece of yellowed, brittle paper. She opened it. Red ink. "Don't trust anyone in this town. Helen knows. She burned the lodge, 2006. Don't let them erase again." R.M. Emma's chest tightened. R.M., not Robert T. Miller. The handwriting was different. Hasty, panicked. Someone had been down here after her grandfather. Someone who knew the truth had survived. She reached deeper into the cavity and felt something plastic. A matchbox, clean, new, no dust. On the cover, Helen's Diner since 1998. She flipped it open, 3 matches inside, and a tiny folded scrap of paper. 2006, destroy evidence, lodge too risky, burn again if necessary. Her hand shook, not from cold. Then a thought hit her. When she'd bought the rope at the store, Helen's hands had smelled faintly of machine oil, just like the scent clinging to the crates in the cellar. Emma stood abruptly. Her flashlight swayed across the ceiling. She grabbed her backpack, stuffed the matchbox and note into the inner lining. Not ghosts, not a coincidence. People. Small-town power. Silence built on fear. She looked around. The cellar didn't feel like a storage site for the first time. It felt like a crime scene, in the middle of being cleaned. As she climbed the stone steps, her heart pounded. Questions swirled. Who wrote the note? Did the missing man from 2006 leave anything else? Is Helen the gatekeeper? Or the arsonist? She shut the cellar door and braced it with a chunk of wood. Then, an engine outside. A truck? A car? She couldn't tell. She rushed to the window and pressed herself to the corner. A black car sat at the edge of the woods. Its headlights are still on. No one inside. Then, click. The lights went out. Emma stepped back, clutched her backpack. She wasn't afraid of the ghosts in old books anymore. She was afraid of the people who were still alive and willing to do anything to make sure the past stayed buried. Dark clouds rolled in like thick smoke curling around the peak of the lodge. Pine trees bent with the wind, creaking like bones clashing in a coffin. Emma had seen city and news storms, but this one felt different. It gave no warning. It didn't follow weather patterns. It felt intentional. She stood in the living room, gripping her backpack stuffed with every piece of evidence. Her grandfather's journal, the Operation Cobra files, the burn orders, and Helen's diner matchbox. The glass windows rattled. Then, bang! A door slammed shut in the west hallway. Wind howled through the gaps. Rain hammered the roof like war drums. Then it hit her. The cellar. If the lodge collapsed, whatever was still there would be buried again. Emma sprinted through the kitchen, threw open the cellar hatch, tied the rope around her waist, and descended. Her flashlight bounced wildly. Rain had begun seeping through the old wood overhead. Cold droplets struck the back of her neck like ice. She gathered what was left. The Normandy map, soldier photos, casualty reports. The documents were thick, heavy, and musty, but alive. She stuffed them into her bag, zipped it shut, slung it over her shoulders, and began climbing. But on the third step, her foot slipped. It was slick as ice. She fell backward. Her head struck the edge of a crate. A thin line of blood trickled down her temple. Everything blurred. And then, in the quiet between thunder, a voice. Lily. You always run, Mom? Just like Grandpa ran from the war. You never choose truth. Emma gritted her teeth, pushed herself up, climbed, one rung, then another. Each breath was like a hammer pounding in her ribs. She reached the kitchen, slammed the hatch shut, wedged a steel pipe across it. She turned, and through the steam-fogged window, a shadow passed. Just for a second, then gone. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She stepped into the center of the living room, clutching the old Bible her father left behind. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. I know you're out there. I know you want to bury this one more time. But this time, I'm going to expose it. For the forgotten, for my father, for my daughter, and for the justice this country deserves. Thunder cracked. Wind screamed, but inside her chest burned something more substantial than the storm. Not fear, but fire. When the sun rose the next morning, the lodge was still standing. The roof leaked, beams were broken, and rainwater had pooled into shallow puddles across the floor. But it hadn't collapsed. Emma didn't leave. Instead, she dragged a wooden table into the main hall, wiped it clean with a damp cloth, and began laying out the pieces. The Normandy map, the matchbox from Helen's diner, the unreleased casualty reports. The notebook had a photo of her father, young, in uniform, standing beside a man named R.T. Miller. She didn't call anyone, but people came. The first pickup truck pulled into the gravel drive, then a second, a third. Townsfolk, many of them the same ones who'd avoided her, whispered behind her back, stepped through the doors of the lodge, eyes torn between curiosity and dread. James, the son of the former manager, approached the table. He leaned in and carefully flipped through one of the reports. "This is my dad's handwriting," he said quietly. Emma nodded. "He kept records of the soldiers who stayed here. His name shows up in one of the missing reports." James swallowed hard. He didn't speak again, but his eyes shimmered. Then Helen arrived. Different this time. No smugness, no stiffness. Her face looked collapsed under the weight of memory. "I won't deny it," she said, scanning the room. "In 2006, I burned some of the files. I did it to protect this town from something nobody was ready to know." No one said a word. Emma stepped forward, resting her hand on the table. "You think hiding the truth is patriotic? I think if the truth would destroy this place, maybe it was worth burying. And the people buried with it? The American soldiers who died without names? What about their families?" Helen said nothing. James spoke up. "My dad used to say, 'The truth doesn't kill people. Silence does.'" Someone in the crowd began to cry. An older man stepped forward, voice trembling. "My brother used to send letters from Normandy. Then he vanished. I never got an explanation." Emma turned away. Her eyes filled with tears, not from grief, but finally, the lodge wasn't a place for hiding anymore. It had become a place to confront. And for the first time, as the wind whispered through the charred remains of the old hall, Emma was no longer carrying the weight of memory alone. 1 week after the storm, the Haven Ridge sun rose in a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. The lodge was still scorched, still broken in places, but someone knocked on the door for the first time in 70 years, asking to hear a story. Emma sat at a desk in the old manager's office. Her journal lay open, fountain pen ready. On the cover, she'd written, "Haven Ridge Lodge, WWII Memory Archive, Justice for the Forgotten." She wrote, "Don't rewrite history. Don't clean it up. Keep the burns, the blood, the missing pages, so people know. No one truly dies if someone still remembers." James knocked gently. He carried a wooden sign, freshly carved, simple words. "Haven Ridge Lodge, not for profit, not for show, for truth." Emma nodded. Together, they mounted it over the front steps, right above the blackened mark of the 1948 fire. That afternoon, she sat on the hill behind the lodge where you could see the rooftop, the pine forest, and the dirt road winding into town. Her fingers toyed with the silver necklace, Lily's necklace. She pulled out her phone. She dialed her daughter's number for the first time in 8 months. 1 ring, 2. Then, "Hello?" Emma inhaled. "Lily, it's Mom." Silence. Long. "I know you don't want to hear from me, but I'm not running anymore. I stayed, in a place I believe you deserve to know." Lily breathed softly. "I thought you picked the lodge over me. I picked hiding, because I thought I couldn't fix anything. But this place taught me the truth doesn't need fixing. It just needs to be faced. Like I'm facing you now, even if it's just over the phone. More silence. Then, I'll come. Not to forgive, but to understand. Emma smiled, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. That's more than enough. That night, Emma stepped out onto the porch. James handed her 2 mugs of hot coffee. They sat together in silence. The night wind carried the scent of burnt wood, pine, and something else. Peace. Emma looked up at the stars. On the wall, just below the new sign, she added one final line, written in her own hand. I didn't come here to start over. I came here to be found, inside America's untold history. The lodge was no longer a scar. It was a light on a hill, so those once buried might finally be named. And Emma, she was no longer running. She was a keeper of memory, living proof that even truths set on fire still know how to survive.